This is Mrs. Pullen for Algebra 2. In this video, I'm going to go over additional problems from Study Guide 3. Let's start off with number 14. This is from the June 2019 Regents, problem number 35. Determine an equation for a parabola with focus 4, negative 1 and a directrix of y equals negative 5. So it's helpful to know the formula. So y equals plus or minus 1 over 4p x minus h squared plus k, where h comma k represents the vertex of the parabola, and p represents the distance from the vertex to the focus, or from the vertex to the directrix. It's the same distance. In other words, the vertex is in between the focal point and the directrix. So what you want to do with these types of problems is sketch it a graph. Sometimes they give you a little piece of graph paper to do it on, or sometimes you just have to sketch it. So 4, negative 1 is right here, and I label it F. And the directrix is y equals negative 5, so it's this horizontal line, which we label. And we know P is halfway in between because it's right between the vertex and the directrix. And so we know that this distance is 4 units. Therefore, P is 1/2 of 4, or 2. So right in between here is our vertex, and our vertex in this case is 4, 1, 2, negative 3. So this is H and this is K, and now we know P is 2. The parabola is facing upwards. It always faces towards or encloses the focal point. I say it eats the food. So when the directrix is below the focal point, the parabola faces upwards, and you use the positive version of the formula. If the opposite occurred and the directrix was above the focal point, the parabola would face downwards, and you would use the negative version of the formula. So at this point, we have everything we need to create the equation. So it's y equals 1 over 4, p is 2. Again, we're using the positive version of the formula because the parabola is facing upwards. And it's x minus 4 squared. You're reversing the sign of the h, but you don't reverse the k. And now we just simplify it. And if this is a free response question, you can leave your answer like this. Sometimes you have to modify this if it's a multiple choice question. In any case, this would be the answer to this particular problem. Problem number 15, a recursive formula for the sequence. And a recursive formula refers to a prior term. So if you say a term a sub n, if you're looking for a sub n, the formula is going to have somewhere in there a sub n minus 1, and there'll be something attached to this. In this case, you take a look at this sequence, 64, 48, 36, and we don't have a common difference, but do we have a common ratio? In other words, we know it's not an arithmetic sequence, is it a geometric sequence? Do we have a common ratio? So I take the term to the right and divide it by the term to the left. 48 divided by 64 is 0.75. And just to double check that, you would see is 36 divided by 48.75. And it is. So therefore, this is a geometric sequence with a common ratio r. So the recursive formula would be a sub n minus 1 times are. You always have to have at least one term stated. So in this case, I'm going to say a sub 1 is 64, and a sub n is equal to a sub n minus 1 times 0.75. And you can see that since multiplication is commutative, they just put the 0.75 first. If this was a free response question, either answer would be acceptable. But again, make sure that if it's a free response question, that you list out what that first term is. Number 16, they want you to write the equation of a trig graph. So we've graphed earlier in this study guide based on an equation, we created the graph. Now we're doing the opposite. And so first thing you want to do is find the midline, and the formula for the midline is D is equal to max plus min divided by 2. So we see the maximum y, again, it's the y value, is 8. The minimum y value is 2 divided by 2. So that tells you that the midline is 5. And you can either get the amplitude by looking at the graph. So 5 minus 2 is 3, and 8 minus 5 is 3. So we know the amplitude is 3, but some people just feel more comfortable with the formula. And so that would be max minus min over 2. So that would be 8 minus 2 over 2. That's 6 over 2 is 3. So we can show that two different ways. And then finally, we need, we need two other things. One, we need the frequency. The frequency is 2 pi over period, or you can use the formula frequency times the period is equal to 2 pi. Either way works. So in this case, the frequency, which is sometimes represented by a lowercase b, we see the end of that cosine curve occurring at 30. So that's the period. It's like the period at the end of the sentence. And that simplifies to pi over 15. Now, one other thing so we can complete the problem. Notice that is this a sine curve or a cosine curve? Well, since the curve at 0 radians or 0 degrees does not start at the midline, it's a cosine curve. But this is a flipped over cosine curve because it's starting at the minimum value as opposed to the maximum value of 8. How do you account for that? You negate the amplitude. So you put a negative in front of the amplitude. So our final equation is y equals negative of the amplitude, so negative 3 cosine pi over 15, whatever the angle you're representing it as, in this case x, plus the vertical shift of 5, and that looks like it's choice 4. Number 17, we're given data, and you have juniors that were surveyed about their social media preference. And so the first thing you want to do is get the marginal frequencies, in other words, the row totals and the column totals. So this is 166, this is 126, and now taking your calculator, you're adding up the rows. I get 219, 61 plus 114 plus 35, 210. Be careful, sometimes they give you the totals, so you don't want to include that in. That happened to a couple of people on the first test. So just take into account, sometimes we include it and sometimes it's not. If one of the students' responses is selected at random, what is the probability that the student's favorite social media is YouTube, given that that a girl is randomly selected? Again, make sure you have proper notation. Here goes a description, not numbers. So it's social media given Actually, it's not social media, it's YouTube. You have to be really clear. Given girl, so the condition is the girl, so you're only looking at girls, which in this case is the row. So you're not looking at everyone, you're only looking at the girls. And of those, 35 out of 210 use social media. They don't tell you to round it. It's really not necessary. You can leave it just as is. You could simplify it, but if you simplify it wrong, we have to take off points. If one of the students is randomly selected, find the probability that this student is a girl or that social media app is Instagram. So keyword is or. You actually have to use the general addition formula, which unfortunately they don't give you on the Algebra 2 regions. And you've heard me complain before because they do give it on the AP Stat exam. So they should be giving it in the regions, but that's just me. Again, make sure you have proper notation. So Instagram, or you could use the word or if you'd like, girl. So that's the probability of Instagram plus the probability of girl minus the probability of both, because A and B is just both instances. So the probability of Instagram, okay, so there are 166, and this is always out of the total. So there are 429 plus the probability of a girl is 210 over 429 minus the probability of both. And so both would be the 114. So minus the 114 over 429. That's the probability of both. And I'm just, since we have the same denominators, I'm just adding the numerators and then putting it over the denominator. Oh, I made a mistake. Hold on. 166 plus 210 minus 114. That's 262 over 429. And I would leave the answer like that.